Good morning. I'm Bill Cockrell, and on behalf of the Learning and Retirement Committee, I welcome you to this morning's program. First, a couple of administrative things. First, tomorrow morning at 10:30 in this room, Jean Berg will be conducting one of her Those Were the Days interviews with a surprise guest. So put that on your calendar for tomorrow morning at 10:30. Secondly, how many people here have a cell phone with them? Raise your hand. How many people don't have a cell phone with you? All right, all of you, silence your phones, please. Finally, we will save some time as usual at the end for questions and answers. We'll do that as we always do. If you have a question, raise your hand and please wait until someone brings you a microphone. Either John or Grace will bring you a microphone and you can pose your question. Vernon, if there's any question about people hearing them, you can repeat the question. Our guest today needs no introduction. It's obvious. I think everyone here knows Vernon Baker, and we know a lot about Vernon and are appreciative of the work that he has done at the Pines over these recent years. Today, however, we're going to talk about Vernon in his pre-Pines life. Who is Vernon Baker before he got here? I assume it's the same person, but talk a little bit about what has led Vernon in his life's journey to be here to lead this organization. Vernon, as we start, I'd like for you to share some of the important aspects of your growing up years, particularly maybe mentors, what stands out in those early years in your life, maybe inflection points, moments of revelation. Tell us about your early life.
Okay. Can everyone hear me okay? Is that good? So, and some of you have heard some of these stories and facts about me in the past, but as I've attended birthday dinners and that type of thing. So let me first say that I'm really disappointed y'all didn't have anywhere else more interesting to be this morning. So anyhow, it gives me great pleasure to be serving again. As I always try to say, I really appreciate the opportunity to serve as the president and CEO here at the Pines. It's a very special place, and myself and our team are trying to make it even more special every day. So I'm the youngest of 5 boys, grew up in Blacksburg, Virginia, and all 5 of us were born in Roanoke Memorial Hospital in Virginia. And because there was no local hospital in Blacksburg, my father worked at Virginia Tech for 30 plus years, not as a professor. He was in the agronomy department in the extension service. And my mom was a school teacher. She taught school before she started having children, took about 20 plus years off, and then went back to teaching. And she taught a total of 23 years. I led a charmed childhood, grew up in the summertime like this, riding our bikes all over the neighborhood. Mom and dad probably had no idea where we were or what we were up to. They trusted us. Blacksburg was a small, safe town, small, safe college town. And I can remember as a child coming inside at night, with sweat, and my feet were green from running in the grass all day, and things. We grew up in town, in Blacksburg, in town. However, my father had our house was on a half-acre lot, and then the other half-acre was a garden and fruit trees. So my entire life growing up, I never had a frozen vegetable or a frozen fruit. It was always that my parents had 2 freezer chests down in our basement that they froze fruits and vegetables, and we had canned fruits and vegetables as well. There was nothing that mom and dad couldn't cook or couldn't make. They both grew up on a farm, and it was wonderful. My 4 older brothers, my two oldest brothers, one 12 years and one 10 years older. It was like, I'm sure, with mom and dad having a different family, but my earliest years were my oldest brother height pushing me or pressing me up above his head with my back up against the stucco ceiling in the living room. So, and with no, and it typically, it always happened in the summertime because I would have, red marks on my back from my oldest brother doing that. I'm the only boy in my family out of 5 that did not have their motorcycle license, because I learned from my mother of yelling and screaming and crying about my other brothers, not necessarily yelling, but being upset that they were going to die and all those different things. So I didn't want to put her through that angst. And so I never got my motorcycle license, but the other 4 had their motorcycle license. But used to ride our bikes anywhere and everywhere around Blacksburg. I have been working ever since I was 9 years old. I inherited a newspaper route, twice a week newspaper route, the News Messenger. It was a Blacksburg and Christiansburg newspaper, and I delivered that on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I inherited that from the brother that was closest to me in age. He was 4.5 years older than I am. He's since passed away. So that's I have three brothers that are living. And then at the age of 12, I inherited the newspaper route, the daily newspaper route, from my brother Height that had it. And then he passed it down to Mo, and then he passed it down to Randy. Then he passed it down to Stuart, and Stuart passed it down to me. So there were some neighbors and things. We had about 50 customers on average. And some of those neighbors had a Baker Boy delivery person for like 25 years. And so I delivered the daily newspaper, the Roanoke Times and World News. It wasn't always called the World News. I can't remember when it changed to the World News, but it was the Roanoke Times when I first started. And I delivered that from the time I was 12 until the time I was 18 and graduated high school. So that helped fund hobbies and buying bikes and aquariums. I was very interested in fish and aquariums. I had a saltwater aquarium. I had little tiny seahorses and sea anemones and starfish, which was really cool. I had to hatch brine shrimp live in a little small fish bowl to feed the seahorses and things. And then I had a tropical fish aquarium as well. And so that was really interesting. But so that's kind of my funny story in childhood. When I had the News Messenger, I had a couple businesses in downtown Blacksburg that were my customer, and a couple restaurants and that type of thing. And so we'd drop off 5 or 6 newspapers so they could have customers that came in and to read them. And so there was a local donut shop in downtown Blacksburg, and we also had a Rose's. Some of you that grew up in the South or lived in the South, that kind of thing, we had Rose's department store. So Rose's had a deli counter, or not a deli counter, but a soda shop kind of counter. And above that counter was a wire with balloons tied on it. Anybody remember this? And you could pick a balloon and they would pop it, and that's the price. So they'd have a folded piece of paper inside the balloon, and it either had 1 penny or 99 cents on it, anywhere from 1 penny to 99 cents. And that's how much you paid for your banana split. So my brother Stuart and I, at first, I would help him deliver papers when I was younger, and then I took over the route. And so sometimes it would be my brother Stuart and I, and sometimes it'd be by myself. And we would go to Rose's. We would eat a banana split, and then we'd go to Carolee Donuts, and I'd eat 2 or 3 donuts and a couple glasses of tall, cold milk, and then go home. And mom and dad would wonder why in the world we weren't hungry. Why don't you like whatever it is that we're serving for dinner? My mother, it was a tradition in our household that my mother made fresh potato yeast rolls every Saturday night. She would make 2 large sheet pans of rolls and 1 sheet pan of cinnamon buns. And we would have fresh rolls every Saturday night. And then Sunday after church, we would have steak and or homemade French fries for Sunday lunch. Now, again, my parents both grew up on a farm, and so lunch was the main meal of the day for us. And so we'd get home from church, and then mom and dad would fix lunch, and we'd have lunch. And then typically after lunch, we'd take a nap or do whatever we wanted. We didn't do any work on Sundays. And growing up in Blacksburg, we had blue laws, so none of the stores were open. And then later on, the grocery stores were open. But you know, it was a great childhood, fantastic childhood. So that's kind of my childhood.
Well, let's move on a little bit in time. When it came time to think about what you were going to do in life, what you were going to be when you grew up, tell us a little bit about that journey. What was that process like? You eventually go to Virginia Tech. I mean, where else would you go? You are a Hokie born and bred, right? You can explain what a Hokie is. But to tell us about your progression and what kind of drew you into your career path, and what were some important steps along that path?
So some of the influences, my father was one of the hardest workers that I've ever known. Both my parents, they never sat down. We never took a family vacation to like the beach or anything like that. It was always going to see our relatives, our cousins, and they lived on farms. And so our vacation was going to our relative's house. And my father, being the youngest of 5 boys, he didn't get married till he was older. So my dad was 31, mom was 20 when they got married. They were both juniors in college. Dad was a junior at Virginia Tech, mom was a junior at Longwood College. And so after they finished college, actually, they moved to Blacksburg. And in the late 1940s, my father fought all 4 years in World War II. And so all I knew was work. I mean, we worked in the garden pulling weeds. I can't tell you how many papers I wrote in high school and college about how weed pulling built character, because that's what my father said. You know, this will build character, son. So I wrote a lot of papers in high school and college about character building. So one thing that I didn't mention in my childhood, my oldest brother, Height, I think back in the day, you know, very free spirited. He graduated high school. He's 12 years older than I am. So he will, this year he'll turn 74 years old. And so he hitchhiked across the United States from Virginia to California. He was very involved in the College Crusaders. I don't know if anybody knows the College Crusaders, but very religious, very faithful person. And so he and his girlfriend at the time took me to college, Blacksburg College Baptist Church, and we saw film and that type of thing. And that's where that I accepted Christ when I was 12 years old. And I owe it to my brother and his wife to introduce me to my experience. We grew up in the church. I grew up going to United Methodist Church. But then, so my faith had a lot to do with it. Also in 1977, on July the 6th, 1977, my grandmother, the only grandparent that I knew, my father's mother, celebrated her 100th birthday at our house in Blacksburg, Virginia. She was living with my dad's sister, and my dad's sister had had a stroke and she was recuperating. And so she came to live with our family for about 9 months. So I had my dad that was 47 years old when I was born. So I had an older father, and I used to be upset about having a father that was about the same age as some of my friends' grandfathers. And that used to upset me. And I can remember crying as a little child, as a little kid, and at 7, 8, maybe 9 years old, that my parents were going to die. And I didn't, obviously as a child, you don't want to lose your parents. And so I can remember crying and being upset that My dad was going to die because he was older. My mom was 35 when I was born, so that was still a little bit older, back in the early 60s. And so I always had an affinity for older people. When I was a little kid, I remember going to see my grandmother and my cousins, and I would make pot holders with my grandmother. So I made on the little small loom, I would make pot holders. And I can't tell you how many pot holders I made, but I made a lot of them. And if my mother and father were still living today, they would have some of those pot holders in their kitchen drawer that I made. I gave them away, for Christmas presents and all kinds of things. But fond memories of making pot holders with my only grandparent that I knew. So I always had an affinity for older folks. It was always understood in my family that all five of us, all five boys, would go to college. It was never questioned. Mom and dad never put any kind of constraints on where we would go. They paid for all of us to go for undergraduate school. And if anybody went to graduate school, then we were on our own for that. But so it was understood that they were going to pay for undergraduate. And 4 out of 5 of us happened to go to Virginia Tech. So my middle brother, Randy, went to UVA. And so it was very fortunate for them. We all went in state and that type of thing. But it was my parents, my dad working for Tech. He wasn't in business. My mom was a school teacher. She wasn't in business. And so I really didn't have any direction and had no earthly idea what I wanted to do when I went to college. So I took general business courses and really didn't love those too much. And then between my junior and senior year in high school, my father had a heart attack at 65. And so he's one of these people that will tell a story that he actually died. He went into cardiac arrest, and they actually had to defibrillate him at Montgomery Regional Hospital and brought him back to life. And he tells a story that, he saw a bright light. He felt very warm inside and didn't want to come back. And he told that story. My dad was, again, we grew up going to church. I never saw him read the Bible on a regular basis until after that incident. He read it every single day. I never saw my father ride a bicycle until he was 65 years old, and he rode a bicycle to the cardiac rehab program at Virginia Tech. He ended up volunteering at Montgomery Regional Hospital for years after that, probably close to 20 years, to help thank the doctors and nurses that actually had saved his life. And he drove people to cancer appointments and that type of thing as well. But he always had a garden. Like I said, he worked thousands upon tens of thousands of hours in the garden. But so with that affinity of seniors and not having any idea what I wanted to do in college, I became more interested in my father's illness and his recovery. And so I changed my major in college my junior year between sophomore and junior year, from business to exercise physiology and cardiac rehab. And so that's what I graduated in from Tech. Still had no idea what I wanted to do. So then I went to graduate school. And same kind of thing, pursued the exercise physiology and cardiac rehab. But I always had, again, this affinity working with older folks. And so I thought I wanted to go to physical therapy school. And so I worked in the physical therapy department, local hospital, and they happened to contract with the local nursing home. And I did that for 2 summers. And one of those summers, I worked with a gentleman that had been a professional baseball player. He was in his 80s. I can't remember exactly how old he was, but he'd had a stroke and he hadn't walked in over several years. And so he'd come to the nursing home for therapy and rehab. And so the physical therapist showed me the exercises to do about the first week or so. And then I worked with him all summer with stretches and ultrasound and and all the different parameters and modalities that you do with someone that had a stroke. Because again, he hadn't walked in several years. He took his first steps at the end of that summer. He cried, his wife cried, I cried, the physical therapist cried. I mean, it was amazing to see this gentleman that had been a professional athlete and was so proud and things. And so I also worked in a men's clothing store while I was in college and graduate school. And so I always had a job. Like I said, I've been working since I was 9 years old. So I had this pharmaceutical rep that would come to this men's clothing store every week, and I'd sell him ties or dress shirts or suits or whatever. And he and I became friends. And he said, well, what do you want to do when you finish graduate school? I said, I think I want to work with the elderly. I'm not sure about what, and I was applying to rehab schools at that point. And he said, well, if you like the elderly so much and the seniors, why don't you get into nursing home administration? So I had no idea about what to do with that. And so I looked into it and researched it and applied to about 5 different companies. And so I got a job as a full-time administrator in training with the local nursing home that I'd worked at 2 summers through the hospital. And so that was in 1989. And I had a couple, you have to have a preceptor, and I had to work full time. And so you work in every different department. I worked in the nursing department, dining, housekeeping, every department. I had to work night shift, evening shift, all those types of things. And so I actually had a change in my preceptor. So it extended the period of time that I actually worked in the nursing home, but it was a 194 bed nursing home. It was huge, and did everything with that company. It was a local company in Blacksburg. 4 people had gotten together. They were in construction, and then they built nursing homes. I think at the time they had 16 nursing homes in the state of Virginia. It was the second largest nursing home company in the state at that point. And so I got my administrator's license February 13th, 1991, and was on the for-profit side of nursing homes. I worked for that company 2 different times. I had an opportunity to open up a brand new 60-bed nursing home in rural Brookneal, Virginia. Anybody been to Brookneal, Virginia?
Got some.
Brookneal, Virginia. It's 30 miles south of Lynchburg. It was a great little town. And this was in 1991 that I opened this nursing home up. I had a choice to go to either far southwest Virginia and open up a brand new nursing home, 120 beds at Big Stone Gap, or in Brookneal, 30 miles south of Lynchburg. So I chose Brookneal. I also could have gone to, I take that back. It wasn't Big Stone. It was Grundy. Anybody been to Grundy? Okay. So there was already a nursing home in Big Stone Gap. So I had an opportunity to open up either Grundy or Brookneal. So my wife, having grown up in Charlottesville, chose Brookneal, but we didn't live in Brookneal. After we took a tour and we visited Brookneal and decided that, now this is 1991, decided that it was like going back to the 1950s in Brookneal. It was just a small rural town. I love the people there and things. But anyway, I opened up that nursing home, worked there for about 2.5 years, did really well. And then I transferred to Charlottesville, to a nursing home that they had there, worked in another nursing home there. I changed companies, and I always wanted to be a regional director. I asked my boss one time, I said, well, what do I need to do to be a regional, to get promoted to be a regional? And he said, well, you need to pick one of the nursing homes we have in the company that's struggling and turn it around. So Charlottesville happened to be one of those, and they had lost money before I got there. My very first physical year that I completed, I made $1,800. Net income of $1,800. And so compared to the $250,000 they had lost a year before, that was a pretty good turnaround. So a regional director opportunity didn't come up, and so I changed companies, and I went from 120 bed to 180 bed nursing home, and I made a really big mistake. I took that job without ever touring that building. Young and naive, but the reason I did that is because the administrator that was there, that was transferring within the company, I'd worked with him before. And the regional that was going to be my direct supervisor, I'd worked with him before. And so I trusted them. Well, little did I know that as soon as I walked in for my first time, that it smelled like urine. And I'm sure many of you have had that experience in nursing homes before. And this was in 1995. And this is also when people in nursing homes, you could still restrain them with a lap belt and put a lap tray in front of them in what's called a jerry chair and that type of thing. And then the regulations came out to where you couldn't restrain. You couldn't physically or chemically restrain. And so come to find out, the new company that I worked for, had not invested a lot of money into replacing equipment and different things. And we did a complete sweep of the entire facility, all 180 beds, after I was there about a year or so. And it turned out that more than half the mattresses need to be replaced. Once we did that, and I got housekeeping to do a good job, no more urine smell. And I've always, throughout my entire career, said I don't want to smell anything. I don't want to smell anything covering up. I don't want to smell chemicals. I don't want to smell bleach. I don't want to smell anything when I walk in. And my entire career, I've told people, if you want to check out wherever you're going to go live or go receive short-term rehab or whatever, if it's a nursing home, you go tour it, and you go tour it at all hours of the day. And if it smells, then that odor's coming from something that's not clean, whether that's equipment, a floor, or a person. And that should be a really, sign of something needs to be cleaned. So anyway, I digress into getting into.
So it sounds like you're still pulling weeds.
My career. Yeah.
Your father was right.
Yes.
So about building character, but your career has kind of been going out and finding weeds and pulling them up, and
that's right,
making things look better. Go ahead.
So I had the opportunity then to go for, I didn't, when I was with that other company, my only second company I'd worked for, my first company that I worked with, I'd gone through my administrative training program. At this point, they had 18 nursing homes in Virginia, and they called me 3 times in 3 years to come back to be a regional. All I wanted is to be a regional when I was with them before. So the third time was the charm. Went back, and as a regional director, I oversaw 9 of those 18 nursing homes. All of them were within driving distance of my home in Charlottesville. So I took a lot of day trips. The corporate office was in Roanoke, Virginia. So I was on the road a lot. While I was a regional, then had the opportunity. There was a change in leadership of the CEO. And so there was a new CEO, and that new CEO hired me to be the chief operating officer, vice president of operations. I did that for about a year or so, and I thought that's what I wanted. I thought I wanted to be a regional. I thought I wanted to be an officer in this company. And I thought, being naive, that I would be able to dictate more of my time and where I spent it. Well, that was wrong. So then I had to reevaluate, because my wife and I, in 1998, had a 7-year-old. No, had a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. And I didn't have children not to take part in helping raise them and all those different things. So in 1998, I take that back. It was 2002. I decided to leave the for-profit world and go to not-for-profit. And that's when I went to Dogwood Village in Orange County. And I had an opportunity to work there for almost 15 years and probably would still be there if I would have convinced the board and health center commission they had a large nursing home, they had assisted living. We had an opportunity to renovate part of the nursing home, build a brand new 92,000 square foot assisted living. And they would not, I could not convince them to build independent living units. And then I couldn't convince them to build a new nursing home that had been built in 1970. And so after beating my head against the wall for several years, that's when I went to Williamsburg Landing as the chief operating officer in a CCRC. When I went there, I wanted to build and my own little, I called it my own little CCRC in Orange County. And it would have been great, but the board was too conservative, didn't want to take that plunge and didn't see a market there and that type of thing. So that's when I left. And then Williamsburg Landing, I was supposed to take over there until the CEO told me that he was going to work about 5 or 6 years longer than he anticipated, which would have been at age 72, him retiring, which would have meant I would only had about 5 more years until I wanted to retire. So that's the reason I sought out and came to the Pines. So, did a lot of soul searching, a lot of praying, and I'm exactly where I need to be, I think. And very pleased to be here.
What would you say? You've already kind of listed some major accomplishments, weeds that you pulled and corrections you made. That was a disappointment, and that one other big disappointments you had, or other big accomplishments, maybe on a more micro scale of what you look back on and say, boy, that was just really a great thing that I did, or I really messed up there.
So as a nursing home administrator, any of you that have been in a business that you've had state and federal regulators come and inspect your business, the nursing home licensure inspection is one of the worst to endure. I've never counted all the regulations that the nuclear power industry has, nor have I ever counted all the regulations that the nursing home industry has. But others apparently have and have said that the nursing home industry is second to the nuclear power industry as far as the regulations that they have. And then because of people having bad experiences in nursing homes, they contact their legislators, and then all of a sudden there's another rule or regulation that's made because of a bad experience that someone's had. And that's typical in society, and type of thing. We have all these laws and regulations because someone has done something silly or stupid or broken, not done something maybe they should have or not should have. And then all of a sudden the bureaucrats make a law. The regulators pass something, then the bureaucrats have to make it and enforce it. And so in the nursing home industry, there's nothing better in the nursing home industry than a deficiency-free survey. And I had the experience of having several of those in Brookneal, some of those in Charlottesville, and several of those when I was a regional and things. So kind of a highlight whenever, and then here, just as an FYI, and a few of those at Williamsburg Landing, we've had 3. The last 3 licensure inspections here at the Pines have been deficiency-free. And I'd like to say I had everything to do with those, but having only been here 2.5 years, I haven't had anything to do with those. It's been a lot of good systems in place and some really good people like David Rainey and now Stephanie Klontz. It's a health center administrator. Her very first licensure survey as the administrator was deficiency free. So that's somewhat of a highlight. So I told you I was in graduate school and then started working. And again, I've always had a job. And so my graduate degree, I have one regret there that I never finished it. So I'd finished all the coursework. I went to Wake Forest and Bowman Gray Hospital did my research and just didn't complete my thesis to get my master's because I'd started working in my AIT program. And again, I've always been a really hard worker. And that's what my mother and father instilled in me. And that's the one regret that I never finished that. My master's degree would have made a difference in me getting a job and that type of thing. It might not have. My hard work and just my accomplishments throughout my career enabled me. And I'm absolutely nothing without the good Lord. So he's put me in places where I needed to be, and I'm blessed way beyond what I deserve and should have. But that's a regret. So not finishing that graduate degree. I have thoughts maybe when I retire that maybe I'll go back and obviously do something with a graduate degree or something like that. Just to say that I completed it, because I didn't complete it way back then.
Oh, we're not going to talk about your retirement. Let's just forget that. All right.
No, that's a wonderful thing about where I am and what my wife and I both, she taught for 35 years and she'd still be working if I didn't move her here. If we didn't move, she'd still be working. But I absolutely love what I do. I've never thought of it as a job. And everybody's heard the saying that if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And even though it's a lot of time and effort, I don't consider this work. It's a passion of mine. And I used to worry a lot in college. I did not enjoy my college experience at all because I had fraternity brothers and different friends that knew my roommate, my freshman, sophomore year. He knew he wanted to be an accountant. He got a double major in accounting and finance, and he's been a controller and CFO for companies, his entire career. I had fraternity brothers that were in chemical engineering, industrial operations engineering, business. They knew exactly what they wanted to do. I had no idea. So I just kept going to school until God, literally until God opened a door for me that I saw was a good path for me. And that has been my entire career.
Let's shift gears just
Yes.
a little bit. We've talked about your career, and even though you don't consider it your work, what do you like to do outside of your work life? Your family, being with your family. Tell us a little bit about them. I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about your two dogs.
That's right.
What do you like to do outside of life at the Pines, which can be pretty consuming, I understand.
It can. So I love to work in the yard. My wife and I worked in the yard all weekend. Love working in the yard. We were talking about over the weekend. She probably has more plants inside of our house than most anybody I know. My mother was that way as well, but we work in the yard. So we landscape and do different projects. I love to play golf. I'm not very good at it, but I love to play it. I love to ride my bike. I rode my bike this morning around the neighborhood. I don't do that as often as I should. We love our two beagles. We have a 13-year-old beagle and a 9-year-old beagle now. And so we've always had dogs. We're dog lovers. And family. I enjoy my children. I'm sure everybody enjoys their children, but I talk to my son and or daughter-in-law, and now have the grandson, either FaceTime or talk to, if not every day, every other day. And then my daughter will talk to her almost every day as well. So we're very close family. I love spending time with my kids and my wife. The more I've always said, when I was traveling and wasn't as home as much, my wife and I, every marriage struggles, but we didn't get along as well. The less amount of time that we spend, the more time we spend together, the better we get along, because we're communicating and things. And so, but we enjoy going boating. My wife's parents lived at Smith Mountain Lake for 30 plus years. So the kids kind of grew up going to Smith Mountain Lake on weekends, and on some vacations and things. So we like boating as well. We don't do as much traveling as I would like, but hopefully we'll do that a little more. She's got a little more freedom now, not teaching. She's substituting, but so the outdoors, I'm not a hunter, never been a hunter. My father and some of my brothers were, but golf is kind of my outdoors, and then working in the yard, spending time with my wife and kids.
As we wrap up, talk a little bit about what you've talked about this in other venues, but what you hope for the Pines and this phase of your career. Uh, what are the big accomplishments that you look forward to and hope for?
That's a good one. So I just hope not to screw things up. No, we're the Pines has been a fantastic place for a long time, and my hope is just to continue to make it better. And I think myself and the team that we have now is doing a really good job with that. We still are struggling with dining, and we need to make that. We need to continue to make progress with that. I just in my meeting, I don't know where Jackie is, but in my meeting with Jackie this morning, because Cecil's out of town, but every week we talk about different topics, and in dining, again, we have an opportunity to be able to probably provide the best dining program of any out there in any CCRC, and we just need to get it right. And so we're working on that. But as far as taking the Pines in the future, I think it's been our philosophy that whenever we needed cash flow or to have money to spend on renovations in the community of the buildings and mortar and the carpet and paint and all the furnishings inside, whenever we needed to spend money on doing that we did it all along every year. But whenever we needed to do a big kind of renovation that didn't generate any revenue, okay, so any kind of renovation to the public spaces or to any building a swimming pool or any kind of landscaping projects or anything like that, that our philosophy was that we build more independent living units to generate more revenue to be able to support that. Well, through this strategic planning process, I want the board, the strategic planning task force, and you as stakeholders, as well as people out in the community and some of our partners, our business partners, our accountants, engineers, our financial partners. I want everybody focused on what it's going to take for our current business model for us to be sustainable and be able to replace HVAC units and boilers and carpet and paint and all these things that we need to do on an ongoing basis. And we're going to do what is called a facility needs assessment this fall. And that's going to allow us, we're going to have our architect and engineers evaluate every corner of our campus to tell us when things need to be replaced, when things need to be refurbished and that type of thing, and then tell us how much that's going to cost over whatever period of time, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years. And then we're going to be able to figure out how much money we need to be able to do that. I want to answer that question first, because that's where, in my mind, that's what defines sustainability. So how much money do we need to be able to sustain ourselves without building a single additional unit? And then out of that strategic planning process, then we figure out and we have a roadmap of, okay, well, if we're generating $1 million a year in net income, And based upon that facility needs assessment, we need to generate $5 million in net income. And so where does that 5 million come from? I want us to work with y'all giving us feedback, with, again, our partners and the board and all, to figure out, okay, where do we generate that additional revenue? Do we generate additional revenue streams with having our own home health business, or maybe offering services out in the community that we do here now, or doing a home care business, or there are other communities that are partnering together with other CCRCs that are partnering together and having their own hospice, all of those different things. Or does it mean we do build some additional independent living units to generate more revenue? So before we decide anything, I want to answer that question of what makes us sustainable. And so my goal is to make us sustainable forever. So that's my goal, is to provide care, services, amenities that our current customers and our future customers, stakeholders, residents, whatever you want to define yourself as, what our current and future customers want the Pines to be. And so the Pines has been a wonderful place for a lot of people over the last 35 years. But what do we want to be? What do we want to be? And then what do we need to be sustainable? And so that's my goal.
Thank you. Thank you. It's time to open this up for questions. And if you have a question, raise your hand and we'll get a microphone to you.
It's obvious one of the greatest strengths you have is hiring good people. And when you interview people like David, what kind of questions, what are you looking for when you interview these people?
Everybody hear that? So Art asked, one of my greatest strengths, and thank you, is to hire good people. And so what are we looking for when we interview folks, good folks? We want to vet to make sure that the person that we're talking to, for whatever position we're talking to, has the expertise in their field. But more importantly, two things: that they're a genuinely good, nice, good-hearted person is one, and that they care for other people. And two is that they're going to be a good teammate of ours, so that they're going to be a good teammate and that they're generally a good person, and that they have the background and expertise in whatever position we're trying to hire. I don't know, maybe some of you have heard this advertisement on the radio lately, but there's an advertisement for this HVAC company, heating and air conditioning company. And the owner is talking about, they've grown the company. He's got, 65 trucks now and however many employees. But he said, hey, we're hiring right now. We're trying to hire people that have worked in hospitality. And so he's hiring plumbers and HVAC folks and electrical folks. And he wants people with good heart and good customer service. And he's going to train them how to be a plumber or HVAC person. So kind of the same thing. You want to hire a person that just cares about other people, is genuinely nice person, good-hearted person. And then we're looking for a person that's already trained, especially at a director level. They already have that expertise. So I'm not in the business to train somebody how to be a CFO or director of facilities. So we want to hire that person that has that expertise.
So I've heard behind every great man is a great woman that's supporting him. And you've pulled a lot of weeds, but where did you find your rose?
So you are correct. I'm not sure I'm a great man, but I certainly have a great wife and partner and best friend. So my wife and I met in high school. We are high school sweethearts. So, and again, from a lot of times it's how you respond to bad things that happen, because bad things happen to good people every single second of every day. So it's how you respond. So my wife's father was killed when she was 6 years old by a drunk driver. So her mom remarried, and that was in Charlottesville. And so she grew up in Charlottesville, and her mom remarried her stepfather, and her stepfather was in banking business at the time, and they moved to Blacksburg. And so my wife and mother and her sister and stepfather moved to Blacksburg when my wife was in middle school. So we knew one another in middle school, but started dating in high school. So we're high school sweethearts. So we dated almost 8 years, and then we've been married on July 22nd of this year. We've been married 34 years. So very blessed and fortunate. Do I think it'll last? I hope so. Again, I'm just trying not to screw this up. I'm not trying to screw that up.
Other questions? Here's one here. Katie.
I wondered about this training word. I see in our dining room that some of our more older employees that wait on us, our waiters or service people, help train the new ones. They take them and they have them by their side as they work. Why can't we do that with maintenance and some of the other areas in a very serious business-like way that may bring in money? I know that it's hard to get employees, but are they going to school at all? And if so, is there a possibility of using our wonderful people as teachers to earn money that way? Is that a possibility?
So when you say to earn money that way, what do you mean, Katie? Oh, okay. So people could actually pay us to do an internship or something like that. Well, I would love for that to be able to happen. But typically in today's environment, we, the business, would pay them while they're learning in hopes that we would be able to hire them in the future. So we have a lot of ideas to increase our training and our mentoring and that type of thing. And one of the things it's going to allow, some of it costs money and some of it doesn't. One of the things, one of the ideas, obviously, is the career scholarship program that we're rolling out and asking people to donate to and that type of thing. But also, we do have very good experienced folks that we could utilize better in helping train others. Folks that we might hire, using maintenance for an example, somebody we might hire as a general maintenance tech that has an affinity to want to be a plumber or an HVAC person. They could work with our people that have that expertise and background, learn the trade, and then also go to technical school, and we could help pay for that or give them time off for that. That's something that we really could do a much better job with, and training and mentoring folks and growing our own. We do. We sure. That's right. Right. Yes.
We've got time for maybe one more question. Anyone?
Vernon, one of the qualities that you have, and I think that endears you to the Pines, is your transparency and your willingness to listen to input from others. Have you always had that, or did you learn it along the way in your experiences in all these other places?
So did everybody hear that? So I believe, and my wife would verify this, that I do a much better job listening here at work than I do at home. I've always been a very patient person, and I think empathetic person. And again, my wife will tell you that I share too much, that I'm too transparent. She just grew up in an environment in a school system to where, you were kind of seen and not heard from kind of thing in the school system. It was a very formal process with teachers and principals and that type of thing. I've always tried to create an environment with the teammates or team members, staff that I've worked with, as well as the customer, the residents, a much more informal, friendly, inviting atmosphere. And so that has worked for me. And but I'd like to think I'm better at it today than I was yesterday or 10 years ago and that type of thing. And it's because that I developed new skills, but I try to adapt to the environment that I'm in as well. And so when I was interviewing for this job, the selection committee told me what they were looking for. And it just so happened to be exactly kind of the leadership style that I have. But I've tried to really adapt and give you, the stakeholder, the customer, what I felt like I heard you need or wanted. And so a little bit of both. I think I've had those qualities, but I think I've probably developed them along the way and maybe hopefully gotten better at it as I hear from you. Because most of you are experts in your field and give me feedback on how I can be better. And I try to self-reflect on that. I in no way, shape, or form think I'm the best in anything or think I know it all. And that, going back to Art's question, as far as what do you look for in people you're trying to hire, another quality I look for is someone that wants to be a lifelong learner and doesn't think they know everything. Because once you think you know everything, then you're never, ever going to be willing to improve. If you think you're the best already, how do you get better than best? And so the longer I'm on this earth, the more I realize I don't know.
Vernon, thank you for taking this time.
Thank you.
We're grateful. And thank you all for being here. We will be back here next week. Our interviewee will be someone from the housekeeping department, Ephraim DeBose. Many of you know Ephraim, longtime employee here. So we look forward to that. And then next Tuesday at 10:30 as well, Gene, another program, but certainly one tomorrow at 10:30. Those were the days. Thank you.